As a systems integrator supporting the government contracting community, NeoSystems has aligned ourselves with a purpose-built set of technology partners to support our clients' businesses. Now I'd like to introduce Marty Herbert, who will share information regarding Integrify and NeoFlow and our business process improvement solutions. Marty?
Great. Thank you so much, Don. As Don said, my name is Marty Herbert. I am the practice director for NeoSystems Business Process Improvement Practice. You will hear today a little bit about me and my team, kind of what we do and what our focus is, as well as really talking about today our best-in-breed process automation and workflow management tool that we use to enable our clients' efficiency and effectiveness. So a little bit about me and kind of how I ended up in this role. First of all, I am former DCAA. So I do have that in my background, as well as internal audit for GovCons, and really kind of seeing the system Integrify that you'll be seeing here in a moment. Really helped me to realize a little bit about what what could be done to help effectively support both audits and the internal processes for our clients. Over the last 10 years, I've been doing workflow management and process analysis. So that's really where the core of what me and my team do resides, is in the business process improvement area. I do have some slides today, so what I'm going to do is share those for just a second. So again, the tool we're talking about today is really Integrify. That's what's going to be underlying the entire conversation. So when we talk about Integrify, it is a workflow management tool. You will be seeing it in just a moment after I tell you a little bit about what it is we do with the workflow management software. Really, it's about business process improvement, business process automation, and business process management. So my team and I, we are a team of Lean Six Sigma certified process analysts. We partnered with Integrify to really offer business process improvement practice that serves three core needs for our clients. You'll hear things out and about BPA, BPM, BPI, even a little bit of RPA, so robotic process. That all of those terms are tossed around a lot. So what we've done is we've refined our offerings into the core offerings that are shown here. Again, across improvement, automation, and management. I'm going to talk about each of those briefly, just to kind of give you an idea of what it is that my team and I do, and how we help support our clients, as well as the tools themselves. So first is business process improvement. Everybody's got a process. Everybody has an idea of what their process is, kind of. A lot of the time that we enter into an engagement, our clients will tell us, hey, look, we know we have an issue. We know which process is giving us pain, but we may not know why. We may not know how, and we may not know what it is that we truly need to be doing, let alone what we're currently doing. So a lot of the time it is figuring out first, what is it that you do and why is it that you do it that way? So if you don't know what it is you do, or if you don't know why you do it that way, that's where our business process improvement offering really comes to play. So knowing what you do also helps to realize whether or not that is happening efficiently. So we can help figure out how the process flows, document what that flow is using the IBM BlueWorks Live tool, which gives a full documentation of what the process is, both in flowchart view and narratively, and really help assess to where improvements can be made along the way. So as we look back at 2020 and everything it was, there have been a lot of changes. So you likely have seen a lot of changes in the way things that are done, and those changes happened quickly without the ability or the desire to wait a second, we need to document those. Wait a second, we know that it's changing, but now how are we doing it? We know that it might be better now, but maybe not. So with all of the changes, the biggest question on everybody's mind now is, what is the new normal? So a type of project that is business process improvement based can help to eliminate waste in the new processes, as well as making sure you document where you are now so that you can know where you're going by knowing where you have been with the process. So again, that's our business process improvement and what we do with that. Next is really the core of what I'm going to be talking about today, and it revolves around business process automation, workflow automation. We hear a lot, whether it's in articles that we read through LinkedIn or online, our favorite business journal, we hear a lot about workflow and automation and robots and how do we become more efficient? How do we know what we're doing? So what NeoSystems did is about 8.5 to 9 years ago, they invested in a tool called Integrify internally first. So what we did is we took a look at ourselves and said, what processes do we need to do better, more efficiently, and with auditability, traceability? So Integrify served that need. Integrify allows us to connect the processes between the systems. So yes, we are using CostPoint. We are also using the different tools that you'll hear about today, and each of those tools also has their own data associated with them. If you think about a process, a lot of the time it's happening in between the systems because tasks a lot of the time are happening inside of a system. So what we've seen at NeoSystems and really where Integrify has shined is we've seen the shift from siloed systems and that transition from siloed systems into massive ERPs. Those ERPs were then doing great things. They were doing a lot of things great, but also there were many things that they were doing mediocre. We've also now seen that shift from the massive we can do anything ERP back to purpose-built systems. It's part of the reason that you're here today is to hear about those purpose-built systems. So the main difference in the current paradigm is really the systems aren't, or at least shouldn't be, siloed. And again, that's where the process comes into play. So there's a series of interconnected purpose-built systems that's really the name of the game for all business needs at this point. And it's likely the reason, again, that you're listening to what it is we're talking about. I've personally seen a lot of companies take a technical approach to what's happening in between the systems, connected the disparate systems to make sure the data flows, and that's good enough. I've also seen the missteps and sidesteps from taking a purely technical approach. If you think about it, we really, we all know that between the systems, the process, the decision has to be made to make sure that the data is still correct as it goes from system A to system B. So sometimes it could be, let's take employee information as an example. So over in the HRIS, there's a lot of information there, but maybe there's a lot of that employee data that needs some kind of process massage to make sure that it is what the ERP needs, make sure that it's what CostPoint needs, make sure that it's where that it's in a format that has what the system, the destination system has in mind. Many of you on this webcast have probably even been the recipient of the email that asks for the necessary information to complete a record or fill in the blank for an employee or for any kind of financial types of processes. You answer the question and you send back the email. The person on the other end then has to take that information out of the email. Maybe it's copy paste, maybe it's just rekeying it, but it's now taking it from system 1 to system 2 by way of email and by way of rekeying. All this amounts Lean Six Sigma certification in me. All of this amounts to the wasted time and effort that we're concentrating on some of the non-value added time. That's where Integrify and also NeoFlow comes into play. So Integrify and NeoFlow help to solve the issue of all the rekeying by pulling the data from the source systems, adding in the relevant task-driven data, and then pushing it into the recipient system through a series of rules-driven processes. So if your system has the ability for a direct connection, we can pull from it. If it has integration methods or APIs, we can likely write back into it. So one of those systems is, of course, as you've heard already, CostPoint. We have a flow for that. So because we've been working with Integrify for so long, we have now developed a core way of doing things. We know how accounts payable works with CostPoint. We know what the general flow is for accounts payable for the numerous clients that we've served in the past with Integrify. The same thing is true for accounts receivable and vendor management, financial approvals, employee workforce, what you're seeing here. So using the business process management power of Integrify, taking our experience and expertise, putting those two things together, we've created a baseline that has process that results in a process that is quick to implement, optimized for CostPoint ERP, and many of them will both pull and push data to the source system, to CostPoint. At the same time, these same NeoFlows that are pre-built also can serve. So a lot of the time we hear, yeah, but. That's a great flow, but I also do this. Great. NeoFlow can also start as a conversation, as a baseline for discussion and optimization to your specific system, to your specific needs. And if you're not a CostPoint user, it can also help to start the conversation about, well, where do we connect? What data do we pull? So this list also gives you an idea of what workflows can be managed through Integrify. So whether it's procurement to payables, hire to retire, recording to reporting, basically anything that you can think of that has a process, a procedure associated with it, Integrify can be built to support those processes. So from business process improvement to business process automation, we also find ourselves with business process management. So again, we talked about the number of changes that happened last year and kind of where companies are. And what we've heard is that a lot of times you're just needing help. So what we've done is most recently, we've created a business process management full service BPM offering. So what it does is it will initialize Integrify in our FedRAMP environment. It will connect to your ERP. We will help you to then set up your users, your baseline processes, and then in the spirit of full service, we will be there all the time. We will be your administrator for your business process management because we do have the expertise in-house to be able to support you, your company, and your processes, regardless of whether it is the baselines of NeoFlow or the other processes that you need to create within Integrify, so that you don't have to necessarily have someone carve out a specific piece of their time, or perhaps even needing to try to find someone who can help to serve that role. So combining our experience with GovCon and our passion really for the business process management and automation, that's how we're offering also a full service BPM service at this point. So with that, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop the slideshow for just a moment and also stop my share, because I'm going to actually now talk a little bit with one of our clients who recently implemented Integrify. So what I'm going to do is introduce both Mary Urquhart and Dawn Raymond. They come to us from Fraunhofer. Good afternoon, ladies.
Good afternoon, Marty.
Hi, Marty.
Hi. So both of them were really key in getting Integrify processes up and running. Mary continues to manage the processes as an admin in the system. Really what Neo did is we helped them to realize business process efficiency and a unification that you'll hear about a little bit by implementing purchase requisition, goods receipt, vendor ratings, and AP management. So I mean, it was a pretty big task, but at this point, we're kind of level set. They're out there doing processes, processing quite a few workflows every day, even. So first, and I'm going to actually turn to Dawn for this one. Can you tell everybody a little bit about before Integrify, the life before Integrify, kind of what it looked like before that came into play for you?
Yeah, sure. So just a little bit on background on Fraunhofer. We are a research and development organization. So we do a lot of work with state and federal governments on contract research projects. We have several divisions throughout the U.S. And prior to CostPoint and Integrify, each location really had a different requisition process. And most of the steps were manual. So there really was, a lack of consistency and collaboration throughout the whole organization in regards to our procurement process. We process all of the AP payments out of our HQ office, headquarters office, which is located in Michigan. So there was a lot of reliance on snail mail. All of the centers throughout the U.S. were required to send in hard copies, a three-way match of invoices in order to get that payment processed. So there was always delays in payments. There was a lot of paper pushing, and just a lot of small repetitive manual tasks, lots of emails, lots of follow-up phone calls, vendor follow-ups, and just a lot of steps that were really prone to human error and lost paperwork, which all lead to compliance risk from a federal and a company standpoint. So, overall, the process was, not the most efficient, and it really was a costly process for all the parties involved.
So now that we've been through implementing Integrify, connecting it to CostPoint, how has it changed the way that you, or really the process users, interact with you, with CostPoint, and vice versa?
So the users only see the Integrify interface. There's maybe outside of the accounting department and the HR department, 10 people that have access to CostPoint itself. And even then, they're just going into enterprise reporting to pull the POs. So that was a nice feature where we could pull those nice POs. Everyone's is uniform, everyone's is the same. It's really easy to interact with the users. If there's a question on an invoice, there's the discussion section in Integrify where you can put the individual you need to ask a question to and put it in that request so you can see the discussion. So when an auditor comes in and be like, oh, I see that you paid this invoice and it was $1,000 more, but I see that you talked to, Brian, and Brian said that was fine. The quote changed after the fact. So it's been a great way to interact with the employees. The emails going from Integrify help instead of actually going through Outlook and having to attach all the emails to everything. It's all in Integrify.
Yeah, I know that's one of the things that I hear a lot about too is, really that audit trail and what's called the request detail. It's great how we kind of set the stage for, the demo that I'll be showing here in just a second. So since we've been through a couple processes and since we implemented so many, which one's your favorite so far?
Procurement by a landslide. I love the requisition to the goods receipt and then vendor rating. It's following our policies and procedures. It was really easy to get up and running. All we did was tweak a little bit of the information you already had there to make sure it fit Fraunhofer. All the documentation is all together in one request. I'm not going to 3 different sources to find it, which is nice. If there is documentation missing, they can't move on to the next step until it's there, which is very helpful. And it also goes with some of our external certifications.
Yeah, I know. I know certification and compliance is really critical, especially for so many GovCons. Now I know we're relatively early after the first set of processes went live, but I know that you started talking already. Even while we were still implementing it about what's next. So, what other processes have you started to kind of envision? Other ways that Integrify may be able to help?
So there are couple of processes we're looking at is doing offer letters, getting the approvals for offer letters, making sure they fit in the budget and so on, working on proposals for submission, adding new vendors to the system, making sure, our tax exempt form is going to the vendor, the W-9, credit applications if it's necessary, and then the getting a termination process put in place so that everyone knows what has to be done through the system.
Yeah, it's really proven to show that we can do, cost point and non-cost point related processes. So I think that we are really excited, to use this tool and finding more ways to be more efficient with it.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we find a lot of the time too, is usually the pain point really resides with, what is it I'm doing in and around cost point. And then after that first one, after the first whatever process it is goes live, then it's wait a second, it doesn't have to just be cost point. It can be all of these other processes. And I like how you've kind of embraced the idea that it does go beyond that, that it can touch multiple departments. It can touch multiple ways of doing things. So I don't know if you realize this, but I actually went into the system just the other day. In just 4 months, you've run over 2,000 processes through the system. So how has having the business processes defined, repeatable through Integrify helped to ease the volume for your size of team, especially?
So it's nice knowing that I don't have to go hunt people down for documentation anymore. That was the long part of our process was, well, you don't have this quote or you don't have the packing list. So do you have the items? That the approvals are there. You don't have to ask, well, where's the email that said, that PM approved this for their project? It's already in the system for you. The system already knows who the PM is and that they have to approve the purchase. And you just know that it's completed. You see when it was completed. So if someone asks you a question and says, why haven't you paid this? You say, well, no one ever made the purchase, the PO. So it's just nice and easy. And then for us just to be able to look in the request, add a request to see where it sits is very helpful.
Yeah, and I know your team is pretty lean and mean too, so it definitely helps to helps with the volume to be able to know that everything is going to be right there. So of course, my team and I, we just like to help. So we don't a lot of the time, we get to measure things, right? We get to see ROI, time savings, that kind of thing. But I also know that there's a lot of qualitative improvements too. Can you talk a little bit about how Integrify has helped with things like documentation, unification of processing, traceability, those qualitative features?
So if going in and looking at a request, you go in and click one of the little clipboards and all the data is there. You can download the quotes. You can see everyone, if there's a discussion, if they were going back and forth on which vendor they wanted to choose or which quote was better. So it helps us to see that, yes, they're following the procedures. They know what they are now since it's already in the process. It's stated in the process. All the documentation is in one place. So like I said before, I'm not going to 3 different locations to find what I need for one invoice. It's all in one request. And then you just know that your approvals are there. You know that if it's over a certain threshold for us, it's going up to the center director or it's going up to the president of the company. So we don't have to sit here and request that those things be made after the fact. They're actually happening before a purchase is made.
Yeah, and I know one of the big pieces was, really making sure that, each of the different centers was doing it the same way too. So, it's always great to hear, kind of the other things that happen, and that's what I like about, staying in touch, especially with both of you, to be able to hear those types of things as they happen. And I know, thank you for being here. I know that you're both really busy too. But is there anything else you'd like to say to everybody, about kind of Integrify and what it's done so far?
I think Integrify is amazing. It has made processing so much easier. I do have to say, I love Marty and his crew. They are great. Marty has held my hand literally for the last 4 months, and it's been nice. I probably asked him 6 or 7 questions that are the same question, and he always answers it the same and doesn't get mad at me for it. And that's very appreciative. And he also sits here and he'll explain to me how it integrates with CostPoint and how CostPoint works and why we have to do certain things a certain way in Integrify so that CostPoint doesn't get mad at us. So it's always nice to know both ends of the spectrum. Integrify is this and it's awesome, but hey, this is what CostPoint does, and we have to make sure CostPoint works with Integrify.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Especially when you have both systems talking.
Fraunhofer is, we have a very small team, and I think it was a scary process and thought to take on this big challenge. But I have to say, though, with Marty and his team, they made it possible. I don't know if we could have done it without them, but they really held our hands, led us in the direction, and really helped, focus the organization and everybody involved in the process down the path of what we needed in order for this thing to be successful. So I can't say enough good things about them.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And it's funny, when you say you can't do it without me, it's one of the things that, I do want to point out too, is that, speaking of doing it without me, Mary, how much experience did you have with Integrify before this was implemented?
Never touched it.
Right, and yet, Mary, here you are today as the primary admin for the system that I'm actually getting ready to show to everyone. So it's really about, it is a pretty simple system to pick up and use once you do figure that out. That's where we're kind of going next, is into the demo. But again, thank you both so much. I appreciate your time. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and flip us over to actually see the system. So as Mary and Dawn and I just talked about, Integrify is a way to handle your workflows, handle your business processes. So we know a lot about CostPoint at NeoSystems, but we also know a lot about different processes that happen in and around CostPoint. So, if you look at what we have on screen right now, this is one view for a user who may be coming into Integrify, and the types of things that they can do by coming into the system that has a methodology for doing the processes the way that they're supposed to be done. They are done the same way by everyone who starts a process. This is actually our internal NeoSystems dashboard that all users see. At the same time, the dashboards are also configurable. So you may have other users who may need to see a different view of the world. The way that they need to see things like, how do I start a given process? What types of information are being put through the system, and what processes are being used, as well as things like my open tasks. So the dashboards that are available through Integrify give the ability for a user experience to be that much easier. And if you think about that in terms of the way that you use your other systems, it helps to have a unified location for, quote, everyone to be able to start, quote, any process. So it's really about having process management all in one place, across systems, between systems, and in a lot of cases, even without systems. So the other view of the world may be that an executive needs to see how things are going. What is the vendor share of different requisitions as they go through our system, or perhaps the requisition values by vendor. So again, these are all views of the system, of the data that's in the system as it processes through the different workflows. So we've talked a lot about procurement. We've talked a lot about accounts payable and billing. You've seen that there is a NeoFlow for that. So with each of the different processes, it really comes down to, how does the information get there and how does it get through the process? So what the system does is it really relies upon the source systems to bring in the data that's needed. and then use that data in the process in the way that it's supposed to be used. So when we think about an accounts payable process, it might look something like this flow view that happens to be an actual accounts payable process that is built with that is built in the Integrify environment. So you'll notice it looks a lot like a flow chart. And it looks like a flow chart because it is a flow chart that is empowering actual things to happen through the process. It's actual tasks that are being driven out to the users. So from the flowchart view, we also have the request detail piece of the process. What this is, you heard as we were talking about the audit trail and the request detail. This is what the request detail is. Request detail gives you the ability to see who has done what and when. So before I got on this call today, I actually started an AP process by putting in some key information. That information is things like a copy of the invoice itself that came in, who the vendor was, what the invoice number was, filling out kind of the key data. Now, there's a lot of different pieces of this of data that are being pulled in from the source system. We'll actually go back and take a look at this task in particular in just a minute. But in the meantime, suffice it to say that there's a lot of data driven through the process that is then captured. We heard talk about, oh, well, we went from snail mail and having to capture all these things via email. Now the attachments are included as part of the process within the form capture. So where does the information come from? Well, I've got a task that's in progress. So let's go ahead and take a look at what it is I'm doing now. So if you imagine for a second that we are an AP clerk, we've gotten this vendor invoice in. We have certain information that has come in via the first task where it was initially pulled up. Things like the vendor information and that kind of thing that are populated here. What we have to do as someone who has a task to complete are the things that are required by the process. So you think about what you currently do within your system. There are key data fields that are required for your system to do what it needs to do, for your process to be able to run. At the same time, from a business standpoint, there's also key information that exists a lot of the time in the body of an email or on somebody's notepad that is necessary to understanding what has happened in a process. Things like, have you already gotten approval? So you'll notice that with this selection of yes versus no, the form itself will flex. That is an Integrify built form built in to allow for the flexibility of the form to show and hide certain key fields. So if the approval doesn't exist, in this process, we actually have it so that we will be searching for a user to actually assign this to. So in this one, we're going to go ahead and select who the approver is. A lot of the time, and in the processes that we've built for NeoFlow, we're automating even that piece of it. So you think about cost point data in particular and projects. Projects have project managers. Project manager can easily be a data point that is pulled whenever you select a project. So when you select the project, it automatically selects your PM. From there, it then routes automatically to the PM for approval. If there are other levels of approval, that can also be done. Scrolling down the form, you'll notice that it is pretty user-friendly in terms of things like attachment fields, having captured the attachment itself as part of the process, things like date fields that are actual calendar fields that are validated, and then other pieces of information, things like, do we require notes on a check? If yes, enter the note. If no, don't worry about it. Fiscal year that I filled in as before we actually got on the call, and then information that's driven by cost point. So things like project, org, account information that's then driven from the source data into the process, captured by the process, and then routed through the appropriate levels of approval. So here you'll see that based on the invoice that we received, we've entered in this first voucher row for the amount of $15.50. for materials for the installation. So we have the information that we need. There are also additional invoice details captured down here, really just kind of checkpoints to make sure, hey, did we prepare the voucher in the amount of the invoice that's coming in? So with all of that information that's being captured, it really is about making sure that that information gets to the right people so that they can make the right decisions. So I talked a little bit earlier about RPA versus BPA. Now here, when we have a business process, a workflow solution, it is really involving the human decision-making process. This is, I need to make a decision about what it is I'm seeing in this approval. So an approval task is a very small, simplified task that gives you the ability to see the form that was just submitted to you, as well as then make a decision about whether you approve or deny. Part of the reason that this particular task is so simplified is so that it can then just be done on the go. As I shrink this down, you'll notice that it then compacts itself to the point that I can then pop up the same form. Again, imagining I'm on maybe an iPad or on a phone, it's going to shrink that information down, still maintaining the integrity of the data that's been put into the process, so that I can now scroll through, see the information, even if I'm on the go, for what it is I need to approve. Once I've made that decision, I can close the form, come back to my approval task, and make an either an approve or deny decision. I'm going to go ahead and approve this one. I'm even going to enter a comment, just so we can see all of the data is then captured by the system. So as it kind of refreshes the next screen here, we can see that, again, it's going back to the next task. The reason that it's everything coming to me is because of the mode that I'm in for this particular process. So each task is coming to me. However, if we take a quick look here at the request detail, we'll see that all of the data that was captured in the first step of the process, as well as every subsequent step, is then captured as part of this request detail, the audit trail of the process. So I've got each step, who did it and when, as well as all of the data associated with that step, so that I can have a complete picture both internally for me as somebody who cares about the processes and when they're being done, but also externally if auditors and things like that come to take a look. So it's capturing a lot of data in the background so that you can then report on it and have things like those dashboards, reports, and be able to measure things like KPIs that are also captured in the system. So as we look at all of this, the one other thing that I want to point out before I turn to any questions is also the fact that, again, you'll notice I selected Becca in the first step. This has actually routed it back to me, again, based on the mode that I'm in for today's demo. But you'll notice that it's still captured that it should have gone to her, but it actually came to me. This is also delegation. Delegation occurs in the system via a process. So if you're going on vacation, how does the process continue? We all know that a lot of the time it doesn't, right? It waits until you get back. Instead, what Integrify does is it allows you to go and be on vacation and truly be away from the office. Allow someone else who is empowered in that same role to be able to make the decisions while you're gone. Set up the delegation at the same time you're setting up your out of office. And that way, when you get back, you don't still have a full plate. Everything has been taken care of while you were away. So I'll switch one more time over here to the flow view so we can see that this payables process has now started to go through into the approval step. We're now at the finalization step. And basically that's just before the integration with CostPoint. So over here on this create non-PO voucher in CostPoint is really the step where it's going to then push all of this information into CostPoint via web services. So CostPoint has web services. We also recently did an implementation for a Vision client who also used the web services associated with that. So Integrify has the ability to populate numerous data points from different data sources, as well as then integrating back into those systems where those systems allow. The other process that we hear a lot about outside of accounts payable is also our billing request entry. So really making sure that we are getting paid in an expedient manner. So a lot of the time what happens before a bill goes out, we need to make sure that the information is correct. So I wanted to pop over here real quick just to show you that, yes, we can do a selection of the information coming from CostPoint. I don't see any questions that have come in, but I know that I am about out of time. So I do encourage you, if you want to see a little bit more, absolutely reach out to us. Make sure that you get on the calendar to see a little bit more about NeoFlow, about Integrify, and get a little bit deeper dive into your particular business process needs and what you want to do with the system.
Thank you, Marty, and thank you, Dawn and Mary, for sharing your experiences with us today.